Thank you for joining this Keep Your DACA live chat to learn about how to renew your DACA. Legal clinics near you that can help you renew your DACA, available scholarships to help you pay the renewal fee if you can't afford it, how Los Angeles County can help you in the renewal process, and how to avoid immigration scams that can harm your status. I'm Supervisor Hilda Solis, and I represent the 1st District of Los Angeles County. And I'm here to reassure you that LA County stands with you and will do everything possible to help you keep your DACA status. As a daughter of immigrant parents, I understand the sacrifice and dedication it takes to achieve your dreams through hard work, education, and playing by the rules. You embody these values, and no one should convince you otherwise. I will never forget when a high school counselor once told me that I should only aspire to be a secretary. Coming from a person in a position of authority, this shook my dreams and aspirations to the core. But I was very fortunate that another counselor stood by me, mentoring and motivating me to pursue my dreams, to never give up, to count on him for help. He even came to my home to help me complete my college application and to make sure I sent it in. Little did either of us know that one day that girl who was told she would only be a secretary would grow up to be the Secretary of Labor under President Barack Obama. Today, I want to be like that counselor for you. I'm here to tell you that my colleagues on the Board of Supervisors, your Office of Immigrant Affairs, and the entire Los Angeles County family stand with you. I urge you to set and pursue high goals and to never let anyone convince you to give up on your dreams. Use the resources this chat provides you to renew your application today. And don't forget to help your friends to do the same. Thank you, and si se puede.
Thank you, Supervisor Solis, for that inspiring message. Tonight, we thank you, we thank your colleagues with the County Board of Supervisors for the encouragement, for urging dreamers to renew their DACA status that will expire before or on March 5th. But the deadline to renew is fast approaching, and that is on Thursday, October 5th. So tonight we want to answer any questions that you have in terms of when the deadline is, who qualifies to renew, how you can renew, resources available to you at free legal clinics still going on in the community, financial assistance to pay for the renewal fee if you're unable to pay, and a number of other issues. For instance, what happens with my health benefits if DACA expired, or even if I renewed DACA, what am I supposed to do next? How about my student loans? How about my education? How is that going to be impacted? My employment, my wages, things of that nature that I'm sure many of our viewers are asking themselves in determining whether to renew their DACA or not. We have tonight with us two very special guests. To my left, I have Erica, a highly experienced immigration attorney with an organization that helps many, many people with immigration-related issues. Al otro lado, Erica, thank you so much for taking your time to come in this late and volunteer your time to answer questions that dreamers have concerning their status and whether they qualify, and I'm sure they're going to have many, many other questions. And to my right, we have Carlos. Carlos, good evening. Thank you again so much for joining us. Carlos is a dreamer. He is a DACA recipient himself, and he is going to share with us how DACA changed his life and the anxiety that he went through in terms of renewing, the process, how that has reassured him in terms of his status, his ability to work, and everything that comes with DACA. So without much, to say, we really want to use all the time we have tonight to answer all the questions that you have. So please, we ask you that you share this chat with your friends right now. Those who may not know, get your answers ready. We're going to get to as many as possible throughout the next 50 or so minutes. But remember, we need to renew now. We need to do it right. The resources exist. So please, ask us your questions. Make sure you do it. And I'm going to now turn it over to Erica, and you can tell us a little bit about your background. And then Carlos, I'll turn over to you next.
My name is Erica Pinheiro. Thank you so much for inviting me, Rico. It's my pleasure to be here and answer all of your questions. I've been working in immigration law for 15 years. I used to administer the DACA program at Carecen. Worked with DACA youth since the inception of the program in 2012. And I work a lot with unaccompanied minors, refugees, people in detention, all kinds of immigrants, especially those facing deportation or removal. So my specialty is really in deportation or removal defense. So now I'm the Policy and Technology Director of Al Otro Lado. We provide cross-border legal services for refugees, deportees, and undocumented people here in Los Angeles County.
Wow. Well, there you have it. I mean, you don't get better attorneys when we think about immigration, specialties, experience, qualifications, even resources. I know that you've done it all, and certainly you usually don't get such a qualified attorney for free. So for the next hour, you will have Erica's full attention to answer all those questions that are lingering. Please get them ready, and we're going to get into it in a minute. Now, Carlos, one of the things that DACA Dreamers really benefit from when they apply for status was their education. The ability to get a job, the ability to move around without fearing, that at any moment someone's going to stop them and deport them, right? I know, you're going through school. I know you have to leave early. Again, thank you so much for coming in, at such a tight schedule that you have. Do you mind telling our viewers and us, how has DACA changed your life, your education, work, traveling, and then can you also tell us, how the cancellation of the DACA status affected you, if it did, what you have done to make sure that you receive those benefits as much as possible in moving forward.
Okay. Well, first let me say it's a pleasure to be back. And DACA had a profound impact on me. I was still in high school at the time, so I didn't apply to a lot of colleges or universities just because I didn't think I'd be able to do it. I was scared of my legal situation. So I finished high school and I tried doing community college just to see how it went. But it's hard to think before being a dreamer because it changes so much of your life. My relationships with my family, being able to drive, that's something that I didn't have before, or having access to a better education. Those are all the things that came with this new position in life. So it had a big impact on not just myself, but people in situations like me. Now, the day that this was all said and done a few weeks ago, I did go through a little period of sadness, anxiety, just as anybody in this position would. But I also took advantage of the moment and made sure that people in my positions had the information available for themselves and for their family members, because it is a scary time, and this is when we need to utilize all our resources, and the leaders that represent us are here to take care of us. So,
thank you again, Carlos. I know you've done press conferences, you've been all over the place, using access to those resources you have to again let dreamers know that they gotta renew their DACA before the expiration date. and certainly, what to look forward as this issue continues, right? So thank you again, and I'm going to now turn it over to you, Erica. I know the main questions that keep coming through the website, through this chat, concern just procedurally. What is the deal with DACA, right? What is this, cancellation of DACA? How does it impact me? What do I need to do, and when and how? Can you give us an overall overview?
So, as most of you know, Trump decided to phase out the DACA program, which means that anyone whose work permit expires between September 5th of this year and March 5th of 2018 does have the opportunity to renew before October 5th, which is this Thursday. Right? So we are really at the last minute already. If your work permit expires after March 5th, 2018, you cannot submit an application to renew. Your work permit is valid until that expiration date, at which point, hopefully, you've spoken to an immigration attorney to see what other options you might have. Many DACA recipients do have other options to legalize their status. And we'll get into today what your rights are with your employer, with housing, and with school during the period where DACA is going toward the expiration date.
And so, if my DACA expired before September 5th and I didn't renew, what do I do?
You can't now submit an application to renew. Unfortunately, if your DACA expired before September 5th and you had let it lapse, unfortunately you cannot now submit an application to renew. So again, I would recommend going to any of the state-funded immigration legal service providers in LA County. There's dozens of them who can give you a free immigration screening and see if you qualify for another form of relief. But unfortunately, DACA is off the table at this point.
Thank you. And it's the same thing you mentioned. If my status is going to expire on or after March 5th, then I'm pretty much out of that opportunity to renew. Mm-hmm. So as long as I'm still current and my status expires on March 5th or before, then I have until October 4th
yes.
to send a renewal. You
have basically until October 4th to frantically send an overnight package to USCIS. It has to be accepted at U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services on October 5th. So if you're sending it on October 5th, it's too late. So you really, if you have not, if your DACA expires before March 5th and you have not yet processed your renewal, you have to really do it right away and make sure that you're sending it via overnight guaranteed delivery by the latest, the 4th, and make sure that you're using a service like DHL, UPS, FedEx, where they have a guaranteed date of acceptance. Sometimes the U.S. Postal Service, it's an approximate date of delivery, so it doesn't guarantee that it's actually going to arrive by October 5th.
So I barely have any time left, right?
Right.
Tomorrow, latest, the day after, Wednesday.
Yes.
Get my package, and so even if I have to take the day off,
yes.
I need to
Definitely.
run and do it, right?
Yes.
Because Carlos, you renewed your DACA, right? Can you tell us what it involves? And then we're going to get back to you, Erica. Who needs an attorney? What is it that you recommend? Did you use an attorney? Did you do it on your own? How did you do it?
No, so what I did is my family and I have an attorney that we've been going to for years, and my parents and I saved all of our forms, bank statements, high school diplomas, any information that can be used to show that you have been here in the United States by date is available and can help you get the process going, because these are all the requirements needed, and obviously you do need to pay a fee, so that is another thing that you have to keep in mind.
So how much was the fee? Is it pretty high?
It was $495, and yes, it was a little high, at least for me. I did pay for it, so that's why, being a college student, you have a certain amount of budget, but I knew more importantly that this is where my money should go.
I can imagine more so with families who have more than one dreamer, right? That they have to come up with that money. And I think that's why it's so important to remember that many of these organizations are offering assistance to pay the renewal fee. And this is money that doesn't have to be paid back. So really, there is that incentive, right? Go to some of these clinics, reach out to those organizations. On our website, the Office of Immigrant Affairs, oia.lacounty.gov, we have a very updated list of places that offer those free legal clinics and places that offer financial assistance. Many of these places are using their own funds to assist in renewing those applications, and then they hope they will get reimbursed through some other financial means. Hopefully that's going to be the case so they don't end up footing that bill. But Erica, getting back to how complex is it to renew? We're talking renewal, so clearly dreamers have already gone through the process, perhaps, or hopefully they have most of the documents. What do you recommend in terms of doing it on my own? Do I go to a clinic? Do I go, pay an attorney? What is the best scenario? And then what is an optional, way for me to do it, especially given the fast approaching deadline that we don't have a whole lot of time left?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, we're only dealing with renewals at this point. There's no more initial applications for DACA. So if you have not already applied, you can't apply now. The renewal process, for those of you who've renewed before, it's very straightforward. It's really great to have your previous application with you to make the process go smoother if you're going to a clinic. So you just have to fill out the renewal form. You have to have 2 passport-sized photos, your money order for $495. That's it. If you have been arrested since your last DACA renewal, or if you've traveled outside the country, you should have an advance parole document. Make sure you bring court dispositions to see an attorney. Definitely need to speak with an attorney if that's the case. If you haven't had any issues whatsoever, you haven't left the country, nothing since your last DACA renewal, it's going to be a little bit more straightforward, but I still would recommend taking advantage of one of the many free legal clinics that are available here in Los Angeles County, because if you even miss one signature, your application could be rejected. And if your application's rejected, even if you spend a lot of money to send it overnight, you're not going to make that filing deadline. So it's really important to have someone look it over, make sure you have all of the supporting documents, make sure you've signed the form wherever you need to sign, that you've filled out all of the fields correctly before you send it in. And again, there are so many free resources available at this point. It is going to take a little bit more time out of your day to attend some of these legal clinics, because at this point I think a lot of them are pretty crowded, but it's worth it, because it could be the difference between you having a work permit for 2 more years or a couple more months. So really just prioritize it, take the time, get all of your documents together, check the Office of Immigrant Affairs website to see which organizations are offering clinics and which organizations are offering financial assistance. If you're a Mexican national and if you're low income, the Mexican consulate also offers assistance for the filing fee. The Mexican consulate actually sends representatives to a lot of these legal clinics, so they'll have someone on site to review your application, review your proof of Mexican nationality. Usually just bring your birth certificate or passport, and they're able to issue checks on the spot. So don't wait any longer. It really is a last minute, and it really is worth taking the time to do it right.
Absolutely. And Carlos, you said you mentioned you used an attorney to help you. Did the attorney have a copy of your initial original application electronically? Were you able to reuse that to renew? How did that work? I know that completing the application, the initial one, there were a lot of pages, a lot of information, but I suppose that if you used a service and they stored that information, a lot of it can be reused, right? Did you go through that? Did you complete the forms all over again? And can you tell us how it played out for you?
Yeah, so it was pretty much filling in the blanks this time around because I did go to the same attorney that I did last time around, and they did have copies of all my the first time that I went there. So it was an easy process, and my family and I also kept a copy of all the documents, applications, so that way we didn't have to worry about were we missing this information or were we missing that letter. All of it was available to us very easily, and it kind of sped up the process.
Which in itself, I mean, I imagine is quite a daunting, approach if you have to get all these documents in order. We all have, jobs, we go to school. It's time consuming, right? But you mentioned, Eric, it's so true. Whatever we are doing, I think it's time to make this a priority. If you haven't renewed, it is time to do it. If you go on our website, the Office of Immigrant Affairs, you will also find links to county departments that have documents that can help us support that application renewal if we need it. For instance, we never think of the library, the public library. We go there, we have a library card, we check out books every weekend. The library can give us a printout of those records that would establish, show that we were living in whatever we're saying we are, right? So again, if you give us a call, our number is 1-800-593-8222. Our website is oia.lacounty.gov. We can make sure that we either give you the answers to the questions you have. If they're legal in nature, we'll connect you to an attorney, an immigration expert attorney that has those answers. Certainly, any advice that dreamers like Carlos could provide you in terms of making it easier for you to do what you have to do. So now we are going to move on to a new set of questions that are coming up. Here's one that was just posed by one of our viewers, and it says, I am an American citizen married to a DACA recipient who does not qualify for renewal. What can I do to legalize her status? And I think, Erica, that goes for you. You're the attorney, and I'm sure you've seen this question many, many times. Would you mind answering it?
Sure. So the short answer is go talk to an immigration attorney. The longer answer is that family-based adjustment of status, which is when you have a U.S. citizen, spouse, parent, or child over 21 who can file a petition for you, is actually one of the most complicated forms of immigration relief. When I'm consulting with a client to see if someone in this situation could legalize their spouse, I ask about 80 questions. How did you enter the United States? Did you enter legally? Have you ever left? Do you have any criminal convictions, etc.? So it really takes a long time to really get through and make sure that the person's eligible. So again, really make sure that you're going to a reputable immigration legal service provider to get the answer to this question. In many cases, when a person did not enter the United States legally, not in all cases, but in many, they actually have to leave the United States to be able to get their permanent residence, leave and come back. That's the most dangerous situation, to go to an unreputable legal service provider. So a notario, someone who says they're an attorney but they're not, or even some attorneys who really aren't versed in immigration law but they're taking advantage of this moment where a lot of people with DACA status are feeling very stressed out, right? So again, just going to the Office of Immigrant Affairs, really just focusing in on the legal service providers that are there. I used to work at CARES, in full disclosure, but I really do recommend them as a place to go and get a full legal screening, because they do adjustment of status applications, for example, for free under the state funding, right? And there's a lot of other organizations in Los Angeles that do the same. So any DACA recipient who goes in even for a renewal, or if you go on another day to get a consultation, they will go through those 80 questions with you and make sure that you qualify. If you're going, for example, to a notario, I've seen many times they give the wrong advice and it could end up with the person being stuck outside the country, or you're submitting something that you're not really eligible for. So again, really important to just stick to those legitimate legal service providers recommended by the county, starting there. If you are going to use a private attorney, maybe you don't qualify for low income services, to make sure that you check that attorney's bar number, make sure that they're actually a licensed attorney, make sure that they don't have any record of discipline against them. And ask around, see if the person has helped your friends, etc. Really just make sure to do your due diligence and not just throw money away and put yourself at greater risk.
And, Eric, I think it's very much in bringing that issue, because we see many complaints in our Department of Consumer and Business Affairs where consumers, and not necessarily DACA dreamers, but consumers who are trying to legalize their status, go to an attorney or someone who pretends to be an attorney and charges thousands of dollars, perhaps even more than a private attorney would charge, for services that are just flat out wrong.
Right.
And what it does, it creates a case in immigration services for the customer, right? In that case, it's going to close no matter what. And if the person didn't qualify for the benefit they applied for, they're going to be denied, and eventually that leads to a deportation. So we see, very sadly, consumers who lost thousands of dollars, and now, even worse, they're facing some deportation proceeding. So it's extremely, extremely, important to check that those attorneys are properly licensed. I would start, as you mentioned, with a legal aid organization, like CHIRLA, like RSN, like Public Counsel, like Catholic Charities. Many of those, and they're all on our website. We have a list of them that provide almost free services, right? And they're staffed by competent, well-trained, licensed attorneys or approved individuals. So please, keep that in mind. And at the same time, if someone has charged you, for services that either were misrepresented, that they didn't do what they promised they were going to do, and they weren't licensed attorneys to provide legal advice, you can call us to file a complaint. We will try to get your money back. We will try to help them, recover documents, connect you with attorneys that in fact know what they're doing, and make sure that you get the best resolved solutions out of a bad situation already. So, we're going to move on to the many questions that are coming in. Again, share this chat with your friends and now. Let them know it's going on. Send in your questions. Remember, questions relating to housing. Does a landlord have the right to discriminate against me because my DACA expired, or because she finds out that I'm a DACA recipient? Questions like those with housing issues. Questions that have to do with employment-related disputes. Is my employer allowed to deny paying me my wages if he or she finds out that I'm a DACA recipient? How about education? What about with my student loans? What's going to happen with my medical benefits? Those things, I know you have those questions. I know some of your family members have those questions. So tonight, we are going to get to as many of those answers. If we don't finish answering those questions tonight, we promise that tomorrow we will have staff either connecting back with you, posting answers to those questions, but we want to make sure that tonight you check in with us, and then we try to get you the best answer possible. So here's another question that Denny posted on our Facebook chat. He asked, do DACA recipients have civil rights or civil liberties? I know that's a very broad question. Erica, but I think many of us out there, immediately think about our constitutional rights or civil liberties, right? What can you tell Danny about that broad question and how that translates to protection, things that we should do, things we should know and do to better protect ourselves?
So the Constitution applies to all people living in the United States, regardless of whether you have immigration legal status or not. So that includes free speech. It includes the right against unreasonable search or seizure. So, I'm sure you've heard before, if ICE is knocking at your door, you have the right to ask for a warrant. You have the right to remain silent. You have the Fifth Amendment rights to remain silent if you're being questioned. So, if you are encountered by ICE agents, you don't have to answer questions about your immigration legal status. You shouldn't even be asked those questions in LA County by police officers. There's been a rule on the books for decades that police officers in Los Angeles shouldn't be asking about your immigration status. So yes, the broad answer is yes. Like you shouldn't be discriminated against in your housing. Your landlord isn't supposed to kick you out of your housing if you're undocumented. You do have the right to rent an apartment. But really to keep in mind that we're in a new world of immigration enforcement. And so before you get yourself arrested at a protest, really think, what impact is this going to have on me and my family? You certainly have the right to do that, but I would really recommend being more careful as a DACA recipient, to think about the implications of that, because an arrest the number one advice I give to people is to avoid negative law enforcement contact, especially once your DACA expires. So while you have the right to protest and get arrested for civil disobedience, I, as an attorney, would not recommend doing so as a DACA recipient, especially after it expires, because you're putting yourself on ICE's radar. And although you have many constitutional rights, when you're encountering ICE officers, they're not always respected. And you could end up in detention, and once you're in the deportation or removal process, it really is a huge burden. It's legal costs, paying to get out on bond, etc. So really to keep those risks in mind, but also not to allow yourself to be exploited, right? No one has the right to take your wages, kick you out of your housing, discriminate against you, etc.
Thank you, Erica. So Carlos, can you share with us how being a DACA recipient has shaped how you go about your life? Erica mentions, be extremely careful with how you conduct yourself. Those are issues that some of us, who are either naturalized citizens, who were born here in the United States, don't even think about it, right? We think, we have certain rights, and if we do certain things, we may be punished, but we don't think about, that we may get sent back to a different country. In your situation, Carlos, how has this impacted you? Do you drive more carefully? Are you one of those, drivers that are very carefully staying in the lane and start signaling for, a minute before you transition? I know that this must have an impact on how you go about it every day. Can you share with us?
Well, I definitely think, first of all, everybody should be driving like that, especially in LA, but that might just be my opinion. But you definitely have to keep this in mind, because sure, you're entitled to protest, you're entitled to freedom of speech, doing whatever it is that you want. You need to keep in mind that we are not legal citizens here, and these actions might come back to haunt us, because one night you might get arrested, and what happens when you're trying to reapply? These are the questions you have to keep in mind. So yes, I'm a little more cautious when it comes to driving, when it comes to attending events, or even going out with friends. These are the questions you have to keep in mind, and you need to hold yourself to these standards, because the last thing you want is to harm your situation or have any negative impact on the life that you're living, because we're not entitled to this all right now, and we have to remember that.
Thank you, Carlos. Erica, two related questions. One is, my DACA expires February of 2019. Should I still renew again by October 5th of 2017? How do you read that question, and what is your advice?
So I would say no, because the renewal period is only for people whose work permits expire by March 5th, 2018. So if your DACA expires in February of 2019, basically you're not allowed to submit a renewal application at this point, and you're going to have DACA status until it expires on February 2019. So hopefully Congress will pass a DREAM Act, and or Trump does have the ability to step in and reauthorize DACA. That's also a possibility. Maybe remote, but it is possible. But right now, the way things stand is you would just keep your DACA status until February 2019 when it would expire.
And for those who missed us at the very beginning, when you mentioned the need to have your renewal accepted by the 5th, October 5th, versus received versus postmarked, there is a question that came in that says, what is the difference between accepted or received or versus received? Can you elaborate on it?
Sure. So received would be that your DACA application actually arrives to USCIS by October 5th. Again, I would recommend using some of the private mail services like UPS, FedEx, etc., the ones that have guaranteed delivery dates. Be very careful when using USPS because sometimes it's an approximate delivery date. It really needs to be there by October 5th. So that means you can't send your application on October 5th. That's already too late. The absolute last day to send it would be October 4th with a guaranteed delivery date of October 5th. But that's not enough. You have to make sure that you have all of the right boxes checked. You have to have your pictures. You have to have your renewal fee, because if you have something wrong with your application, it could just be rejected. And then even if you send it back correctly later, it doesn't mean that you made the deadline. So as an attorney who's supervised probably thousands of DACA applications, I can tell you that I've seen them rejected just for checking the wrong box on the application or missing a signature where you should have signed. And the application form is long. There's a lot of different fields, some of which are required. And so if you don't fill it out correctly, you could see your application rejected, and sometimes it doesn't come back to you until weeks later. So you think, okay, I sent it, I got a return receipt, or I had a confirmation receipt from FedEx or UPS, everything's great, and then 3 weeks later you get the dreaded envelope back in the mail with your entire application in it saying it's been rejected. So again, it's a good idea to take that extra time, go to one of the legal service providers listed on the Office of Immigrant Affairs website, and make sure that you're filling out checking all the boxes correctly, you have your filing fee, you have your photos, so that your application is actually accepted and not just received.
I knew you had reviewed many applications, not thousands and thousands, so that definitely, doing it over and over again. By all, recommendations, seek the advice, seek the assistance of one of these free clinics. They're free, they're in your community. We mentioned there's a list on our website, oia.lacounty.gov. You can call us toll free at 800-593-8222, and we can give you that information. Now, in the case that I run out of time, I don't have time to go to a clinic, should I have somebody else review my application just to make sure, checking a box or attaching a document? Carlos, what else would you recommend someone do just to make double sure that everything is done correctly and we're not going to get that packet back? I can't imagine how you must feel when that package comes back, especially when you're looking at this deadline that is coming up in 2 days. Any other comments, Carlos, about that issue?
I would just say keep in mind that it's always good to have a second opinion, even if it is your family or somebody in some legal capacity, because it's very easy to make a mistake, so just have that in mind.
Thank you. So the next question concerns, I think, Erica, many of the issues that you're dealing with al otro lado, or across the border situations, right? Peter asks, can DACA apply to veterans who were sent back after serving in the U.S. military and then somehow they were deported? What do you have to tell Peter and viewers like that?
So generally, DACA would not apply to deported veterans because usually veterans are deported because of a criminal conviction, and most of those criminal convictions would make you ineligible for DACA. DACA also requires that you have continuous physical presence in the United States, so if the person had been deported, they wouldn't meet that physical presence requirement. So as Rigo mentioned, my organization, Al Otro Lado, works with deported veterans in Tijuana. So if you do know someone who needs assistance there, we hold periodic legal clinics for deportees, including deported veterans, where we screen for potential legal relief. So the most common ways we see to return legally to the United States would be family-based petitions, U visa if the person was a victim of a crime in the United States. Sometimes we have to reopen an immigration case. They are pretty complicated cases. Sometimes we even find people who should have been citizens and were deported by mistake. So again, they're pretty complicated cases, but we are there to help if the person's in Tijuana. So you can just go to our website and the person can get in contact with us there, but DACA would not apply to that population by and large.
And so that is why it is so important to remember that even if our DACA status doesn't protect us anymore, there may be other options, right? And again, we emphasize that you go to an attorney who knows what those options may be, who knows what the risks could be if you apply for some of those issues, right? And so you get straight answers and a very, very sound assessment of our situation rather than going to someone who doesn't know what he or she's doing and is basically going to tell us what we want to hear, so we pay the fees and then put us in a sometimes a worse situation. So don't give up if your DACA expire, if you didn't renew it or you never applied, because again, remember that no new applications are being accepted. So in this case, go to one of these legal aid agencies, seek the advice of a good immigration attorney, like you were saying, Erica, to see what options you have. So now we have, sadly, to say thank you to Carlos. I know you have to catch a train or 2 trains. We so appreciate you taking the time, coming and joining us, sharing your personal story. I think our viewers can relate to what you did. You did everything right. I understand you renewed your application way before, that way you didn't have to worry until the last minute. Thank you so much. Have a safe ride over to school. Now, what are you studying? I understand that you plan to stay in public service, to do a lot of good things, for the community. That's something that we need so much and appreciate.
So yeah, I am studying communication right now and working on my bachelor's degree. Hopefully this isn't the end. I am going to go for my master's and see where we go from there.
Well, thank you, Carlos, and we're going to continue. We still have many questions that we can answer and want to get through them. Before we get to the next one that was just posted on Facebook, I wanted to ask you about wages and employment and related situations. So if my DACA expires, or if my employer finds out that it's about to expire, is the employer allowed to stop paying me my wages? What kind of rights do I have? What do I do?
So if you still have valid work authorization, your employer is not supposed to ask questions about why you have it, whether it's DACA. They do have the expiration date on your work permit, which you probably gave to your employer when you were hired. And there is a code on the front of the work permit that could indicate that you are a DACA recipient. So if they really wanted to do the extra research, they could figure it out. But generally, the employer is not supposed to ask you how you got the work permit. you have the right to your employment up until your work permit expires. So really the situation we want to avoid is, you know, an employer saying, oh, well, DACA's over and your work permit's going to expire next year, but I'm going to fire you now because of your legal status. That is discriminatory, especially because you do have the right to work. So in that case, I would consult with an employment attorney. There are free resources for employment attorneys in Los Angeles. Just one organization that comes to mind is Betzetic. If you go to their website, I believe they have free clinics for labor questions. I think it's on Wednesday nights, but you'll have to check in with them. And you can call the Office of Immigrant Affairs if you ever experience a problem like that. Whether you're documented or undocumented, you should not be suffering wage theft. So if you've done the work, you should be paid for the work. That's another issue where you can call the Office of Immigrant Affairs and make a complaint if something like that happens to you. If your employer is threatening you, if they're saying, I'm going to call ICE if you don't do X, Y, and Z that you wouldn't normally want to do. There's even situations where you could potentially get a visa through that. So again, really trusting in the LA County institutions. The institutions in LA County are really here to help you. They're not cooperating with ICE. No one's going to report you for reporting. So that's just something really, really important to keep in mind. The Department of Consumer and Business Affairs has been on the side of the immigrant community for many, many years and really helping a lot of people in these situations, wage theft, discrimination, etc. So really just feeling confident that you can call the county agencies and that they'll help you and they're not going to report you to ICE for doing so.
Thank you, Erica, for reminding our viewers, because that is the policy of the county as a whole, the County of Los Angeles. Certainly you saw the message from Supervisor Solis, from her colleagues on the County Board of Supervisors, where they have made immigration, protection, helping immigrants, advancing, the success of all immigrants in the County of Los Angeles a top priority. And so we want to remind you that, even outside of DACA, right, you don't have to be a DACA recipient, someone whose benefits expired, any immigrant. It's encouraged to come to the County of Los Angeles for all the services that the county has. And you can look at health services, you can look at education services, you can look at recreational services. The county invites you to approach us, to come to us, to receive the services we have, and that is the main reason the Office of Immigrant Affairs was established, so that immigrants have a place to go, know their rights, know what services are available, and most importantly, how to access those services in a way that you feel welcome. So please, let us know. One issue that comes up in a question that was just posed has to do with housing. And I think that goes back to a similar issue as wages, in this case, landlords. The question is, can my landlord ask for my immigration status? Is that permissible? And can they take action against me if they believe or find out that I'm undocumented?
So a landlord is not supposed to ask about your immigration status. Sometimes they'll ask for a social security number to run a credit check, something like that. But you're not supposed to be discriminated against in housing just because of your immigration status. So there's even, other, not LA County, but other places have tried to make laws saying it's illegal to rent to an undocumented person. And the Supreme Court has struck down those laws as unconstitutional. So you actually have a constitutional right to housing even if you're undocumented. Again, if you feel you're being discriminated against, if your landlord, you're in a rent control department and your landlord wants to get rid of you so they can raise the rent and get someone else in there, and they're using your immigration status as a threat, that's something that you should be reporting to the Department of Consumer and Business Affairs. Again, talking to a housing attorney. We're very lucky in Los Angeles to have many nonprofits who offer these kinds of legal consultations for free. So again, you should not be discriminated against just because of your immigration status, and really they shouldn't even be asking.
And so here's another opportunity, right, to make sure that you go get the right advice, the right information. You know, the bottom line is that a lot of these issues, as long as we make informed decisions, we will have a much better outcome for ourselves, you know, for our families, and in many cases even our communities, because we are those communities. And when we do well, our communities do well. And certainly that is what the County of Los Angeles wants to ensure, that our immigrants are acknowledged, that their contributions are seen, and certainly to feel welcome and to be part of our community, right? So a related question to veterans. It seems that we have several viewers who are either in the military or they know someone who is. The question is, can I still serve in the military if my DACA expires? Eric, do you know the question to that? And if not, we can do the research. But,
I do, yes. Okay, so generally, even with DACA, you're only allowed to serve in the military under a special program that goes by the initials MONB that President Obama had put into place. So it's for people with special language abilities or with certain types of skills like medical skills, etc. It's pretty specialized and it's a pretty narrow group of people. What I've seen in recent news reports is that even people who had been accepted into the military under that program, which by the way can apply to even undocumented people or DACA recipients, right? So there had been people who were accepted into that program that now are experiencing really long delays in actually starting their service. So I wouldn't trust that that's going to continue. So I would say generally the answer is no, unless you speak like an Afghan language that's in really high demand, they need an interpreter, or you have some kind of super specialized medical training or technological training. So the initials are MANVI, you can Google it and look up the basic requirements, but broadly the answer would be no if you fall outside of those categories. Unfortunately, Spanish is not one of the languages that they're looking for.
And so in situations like this, you would recommend that they consult with an attorney to see if they have other options. I mean, certainly the military is not the only possibility, right?
Right, and it's not even the best possibility in a lot of cases.
Certainly in this case, absolutely. So a question that keeps coming up, and it's now been asked, it's how long does it take for USCIS, the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, to review my renewal application? And I think what the question really means is, when I send my application, how long do I wait before they tell me I'm good?
Yeah, so the guidance right now is 120 days. You're not even really allowed to make an inquiry to the agency until 105 days have passed. So we're looking at 4 months. So, as an attorney, I usually recommend that people submit their renewal application as soon as possible. If your DACA is going to expire before that 4-month period, you might have a gap in your employment authorization. So certain employers are willing to work with you, others might put you on leave, but it's about 120 days. Again, you can't make an inquiry until after 105. And it might even be a little bit longer than that if they're dealing with a huge backlog.
Do I get a receipt or something that they received the application and it's in process? That I get pretty quickly, right?
That's usually within 30 days.
So, I mean, there you have it. If you submitted it and you haven't heard back that it was denied, just kind of sit tight. You say 4 months, not 40 months, 4 months, right? You should hear back and, see where it is. If more time than that goes by and you want to give us a call, we may even be able to make an inquiry to see if they can give us any status. Again, you can go on the CIS website, cis.gov, I understand it is. It's on our website, so you can link it there and check in to see if it was received. You can see what the status is. So I know we're getting close here to the end of the hour, But there is one more question that we want to get through, and maybe a second one in the remaining time. We have a question that says, I qualified to renew DACA, but got a misdemeanor. Should I submit my renewal application?
So that's one where you definitely want to consult with an attorney. So there are certain misdemeanor convictions that will disqualify you from DACA. So DUIs, there's a big list of them actually that will disqualify you from DACA. And then there's others that shouldn't matter. So if it's driving without a license, any kind of traffic-related misdemeanor usually won't disqualify you. But again, speaking with an attorney is really important. Make sure when you speak with an attorney that you bring your certified court disposition so that they can see the penal code or vehicle code under which you were convicted. It makes a difference. So, you know, even if it's the same crime, a different section of the penal code could mean the difference between actually qualifying and not qualifying. Make sure before you go to the court to request a certified disposition that you don't have any active warrants. You can be detained or arrested in court if that's the case. If you go in to get your own criminal record, it's free. If somebody else goes in, there's sometimes a fee. So again, if you're sure you don't have any warrants, just go to 210 West Temple Street to the second floor. You can just ask for a copy of your certified criminal disposition. It takes like 5 minutes, and then bring that to your nearest legal fair that's listed on the Office of Immigrant Affairs website to have an attorney look it over. In some cases, you're okay, and in other cases, the attorney will recommend that you not reapply.
In the few seconds that we have left, can you tell us if DACA expiring affects my ability to get a California driver license if I meet all the other requirements?
If you have DACA and you've been getting your license with your work permit, you know that the license expires when your work permit expires. You can get a license under AB 60, whether you have DACA or not, whether you're undocumented, you never had DACA, you think you might qualify for DACA. Usually you can get an AB 60 license, but be very careful before you apply. Again, I really recommend speaking to an immigration attorney. If you have serious criminal convictions or deportations in the past, speak to an attorney before you make that application to the DMV. There are certain cases in which ICE can have access to your information through the state DMV database. So just be very cautious, again, seeking legal advice if you've never applied to the DMV for a license. If you already have a license, your record's clean, and your DACA is expiring, you can transition over to an AB 60 license without too much hassle. So
that's a really comprehensive and good answer. Thank you. And I know that at outreach events, places we go, many of us or many people have filed an application for some benefit with CIS, Citizenship and Immigration Services, many years ago, and we just left it alone. We didn't know what the outcome was. Maybe in the interim, we had a traffic, violation, and so we feel that we just don't want to touch that, right? Is your recommendation that we find out, we get a copy of our file, know exactly where we stand, and then take some action if it's possible, or should we just leave that alone?
I think it depends on your criminal record. So in most cases, it's safe to request a copy of your file. If you are working with an attorney, sometimes they'll let you use the office address as a safe address, so you're not giving that information to immigration. But in most cases, it is safe to request a copy of your file, and you can see what applications were submitted and what decisions were made, if any. As Rigo mentioned earlier, many people in LA County have been the victims of immigration fraud. So they might have had something filed that they don't even know what it is, right? They signed a blank form, or you didn't speak English at the time, you didn't understand what the form was. In those cases, I do think it's really important to see what happened, because if you have an outstanding removal or deportation order, in some cases you can reopen that and apply for legal status. It's better than not knowing, because if, say you have a removal order and you don't know it, and then you have an encounter with ICE, if you already have a deportation order and you're Mexican, for example, you can be over the border in Tijuana the blink of an eye, the same day. And it's really important to know and be prepared and speak to an attorney to avoid that if at all possible. So I think knowledge is power. If you go to an attorney and see if they recommend it as being safe to get a copy of your file. In some cases, they'll say no or to use a safe address, but yeah.
Very wise advice, right? And as you can see, we used up to the last second, getting the right answers for the questions you have. Before I thank Erica, I just want to remind you that the end of renewing this DACA deadline is not the end of the county standing with you, standing with all immigrants. The County Board of Supervisors, as I mentioned at the beginning, has made immigration a top priority for the county, which means that we are here offering to serve you, to provide you with an understanding of the services the county has for you and your families, and secondly, how to access those services that you qualify for. So we really thank our leaders, our County Board of Supervisors, in making sure that the county is such a welcoming place. We are very fortunate, I think, in living in the county where everyone that is in these positions of leadership is working to help immigrants. Erica, thank you so much, and we will come back maybe next week, the week after. Check your announcements. We want to come back with another chat. Basically, now what? DACA, the application deadline expired. Now what do we do? So I really thank you. I'm Rigo Reyes, the Acting Executive Director of the Office of Immigrant Affairs. We really appreciate you sending this information to all your friends. It's there for everyone to see. Thank you so much. Good night.